The afternoon light spilled across the oak floors of my living room, soft and golden, the kind of light my late wife used to call honest daylight. I was standing by the window, pruning the last of her orchids, when I heard the sound of tires crunching over the gravel driveway. A silver SUV stopped by the porch. My son, Ethan, stepped out first, neat haircut, navy blazer, that permanent air of mild superiority. His wife, Claire, followed close behind, dressed like she'd just stepped out of a courtroom. She didn't look at the house, she inspected it, like an appraiser. "Dad," Ethan said flatly, as though reading from a script. "We're moving in tomorrow." I turned slowly, met his eyes. "Moving in?" Claire smiled, the thin, professional kind of smile that never touches the eyes. "Yes," Ethan thought it would be best for everyone. "You shouldn't be living alone at your age. We can manage things for you now." I wiped my hands on the towel, nodded once, and said quietly, "That's thoughtful of you." And then, I smiled. A smile they didn't understand yet. "Tell me where you're watching from," and hit like if you've ever smiled just to let them think they're in control. Ethan's words hung in the air like the smell of antiseptic, clean, cold, and final. Claire stepped forward, heels clicking against the old wood floor. "It's really for your own good," she said, her voice smooth and practiced. "This place is too big for one person. The upkeep, the bills, it's wasteful. We'll take over the master suite upstairs. You can have the guest room near the den. It'll be easier for everyone." I looked at them, the lawyer and the surgeon, two people so used to control that they mistook authority for care. They had no idea what that house meant. Every inch of it carried 30 years of my life with Margaret, the pencil marks on the kitchen doorway tracking Ethan's height, the sunroom she'd painted yellow herself, the porch where she'd read her morning paper. To them, it was just square footage. To me, it was sacred ground. "Claire," I said quietly, "do you even know how many stairs there are in this house?" She blinked. "Excuse me?" 34, I said. "I counted every one when I built them. Every step from the foyer to the landing. Your husband helped me nail the railing when he was 12. Bent every nail. Still insisted it looked perfect." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Dad, don't make this sentimental. We're just trying to help." Help. That word tasted like rust. The kind of help that takes away your car keys, your choices, your dignity. I walked past them, out onto the porch, the boards creaking beneath my steps. The late autumn air was sharp, carrying the smell of maple and chimney smoke. My old dog, Baxter, lay sleeping by the steps. I scratched his ear. He lifted his head, blinked at me, and went back to dreaming. He had more peace in him than the two people standing behind me. Claire's voice cut through the quiet. "Robert, we've already made arrangements. Movers are coming at 10. It's time to start thinking practically." "Practically," I repeated, still watching the wind move through the trees. "And what happens to all of this?" I gestured toward the garden, the workshop, the rows of roses Margaret planted by hand. Ethan sighed. "We'll handle it. You don't need to worry about any of that anymore." He didn't realize what he'd just said, that in his mind, I wasn't part of the "we" anymore. I was something to be managed, like a worn-out asset. I turned back toward him, my hand steady. "You've thought this through, haven't you?" Claire's smile sharpened. "We have. We even spoke to a specialist about elder care planning. It's really the most responsible course of action." I let out a slow breath. "Responsible," I said. "I see." She placed a crisp manila folder on the patio table. "This is the paperwork. Joint ownership of the property. It's all above board. If you sign, we can avoid complications." "Complications?" Claire's tone lowered, professional and precise. "You're still recovering from your fall last year. If a medical evaluation determines that you're showing signs of diminished capacity, the court can appoint a conservator. It's not personal, Robert. It's just the law. For a long moment, none of us spoke. Only the wind filled the space between us, whispering through the dried rose stems. Then I smiled, the same quiet, measured smile I gave auditors when I knew more than they did. I understand completely, I said. You're looking out for me. Exactly, Ethan said, relieved. Good, I replied, meeting his eyes. Then we'll handle it properly. Let's meet at my lawyer's office, 10 o'clock Friday morning. You'll bring your folder, I'll bring mine. Claire hesitated, sensing something just beneath the surface. That's fine, she said slowly. I nodded. Friday, then. They left a few minutes later, satisfied, already talking about where to place their new furniture. I watched the SUV disappear down the driveway, the sound of tires fading into the distance. Then I walked back into the house, sat in my study, and stared at Margaret's picture on the mantel. Her eyes, caught mid-laughter, seemed to ask the same question echoing in my head. What happened to the boy we raised? I didn't have an answer. But I knew one thing for certain, come Friday, he'd learn who taught him to read the fine print. The house was quiet after they left, too quiet. It wasn't the kind of silence that soothes you, it was the kind that listens. I sat there for a while, letting the echo of their words settle into the walls. We're moving in tomorrow. It sounded like an eviction notice dressed in polite concern. I walked into the kitchen, the floor still carrying faint scuff marks from Margaret's chair. I poured myself a cup of coffee, black and bitter, and stared at the steam. For the first time in months, my hands didn't tremble. The rage had burned itself clean into something colder. Something precise. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in nearly a decade. David Sterling, the voice on the other end answered, steady, professional, familiar. My old friend, my lawyer, and one of the sharpest minds I'd ever met. David, I said quietly, it's Robert. I need you to open the Graham file. There was a brief pause. The Graham file? My God, Robert, that's 20 years old. What's going on? My son came by today, I said. He's planning to move in tomorrow. He brought a folder. David exhaled slowly. I see. And what did this folder contain? An ultimatum. Either I sign over the house, or they'll have me declared incompetent. The sound of papers rustling came over the line, followed by a low, dangerous growl. Those ungrateful. Don't, I interrupted. Don't waste energy on anger. I just need you to get everything. Define everything, Robert. The records, I said. Every tuition payment. Every loan document. Every withdrawal for that boy's education. And especially the file from 2004, the one labeled Educational Loan Agreement. David went silent for a moment. The med school loan. Yes, I said. The $350,000 I fronted for Harvard Medical. You and I drew up a proper loan contract, remember? 4% interest, compounded annually. He signed it, you notarized it. He exhaled, realization dawning. You never told him it was a loan. I told him what he needed to believe, I said. Back then, I thought he'd pay me back in kindness. Turns out he prefers numbers. The silence on the line shifted, from shock to understanding. All right, David said finally. I'll start pulling everything tonight. And, David, I added, my voice sharpening, hire a private investigator. Someone discreet. I want every detail of their finances. Credit lines, mortgages, lawsuits, the works. Robert, he began cautiously, are you sure you want to go down that road? I looked at Margaret's picture again, her smile frozen in sunlight. I've spent my whole life auditing companies, David. It's time I conducted one last audit, a personal one. The next morning, I went down to the basement, not the kind filled with boxes and forgotten tools, but the kind that smells like paper and ink. My real office. Rows of fireproof filing cabinets stood like sentinels, each one labeled by decade. I unlocked the drawer marked family, education and assets. Inside were decades of receipts, tuition checks, medical equipment payments, the down payment for Daniel's first condo. I flipped through them with the muscle memory of a man who had done this all his life. It didn't feel like nostalgia, it felt like an investigation. And as I reviewed the records, something inside me settled. I wasn't just a father anymore. I was the auditor again. Calm. Precise. Dangerous. I found the envelope I was looking for, Intrafamily Loan Agreement, October 2004. The signatures were still clear. Mine, David's, and Ethan's, though his looked rushed, careless. He was young, ambitious, and too confident to read the fine print. I remembered that day vividly. Margaret had made lemonade for him while I'd told him it was just a formality. And like every son who trusts his father completely, he'd signed without a second thought. Now, that trust was gone. But the contract remained. That night, David called back. "I have something you'll want to hear," he said. Our investigator, Peterson, pulled their financials. He began to read. Their leverage to the teeth, Robert. The Seaport condo. Mortgaged twice. They took out a home equity line 6 months ago for the maximum amount. Ethan's malpractice premiums have doubled since a quiet settlement 2 years ago. Amelia's firm took a loss on a tech investment, $150,000 down the drain. I said nothing. They're drowning, he continued. You were right. This isn't greed. It's desperation. I leaned back in my chair, the leather creaking. Desperation makes people reckless. That's their first mistake. There's something else, David added. Peterson found evidence they're planning to use your house as collateral for another loan. They've already spoken with a private banker about it. My jaw tightened. And they think I'm too old to read a balance sheet. What do you want to do? David asked. I smiled faintly. We'll let them think they've won. I'll sign whatever papers they bring, next Friday. Let them celebrate early. In the meantime, prepare a full file, every record, every copy, every number. You're planning something, he said, his voice almost amused. Planning? I chuckled softly. David, I'm auditing. The next 5 days were a study in silence. Ethan and Claire didn't call. They assumed I was thinking things over. In reality, I was assembling a case stronger than any lawsuit. By Thursday night, the plan was airtight. Friday morning came bright and cold. I wore my old gray sweater, the one Margaret always said made me look kind. I wanted to look like a man ready to surrender. David met me at his office. He'd already set the stage, papers scattered, demeanor weary. We played our parts. At 10:03 sharp, they arrived. Claire in a charcoal suit, Ethan in an expensive navy one. They looked like they were walking into a negotiation they'd already won. They sat down, exchanged polite smiles, and presented a fresh folder. This is the final version, Claire said confidently. Just a few signatures, and everything settled. David gave a dramatic sigh, flipping through the pages as though defeated. Robert, you're sure about this? He asked gently. I nodded, eyes downcast. I'm tired, I said softly. It's time to make things easier for everyone. Ethan's expression softened, relief washing over his face. That's the right decision, Dad. You'll see, this will make everything simpler. Claire slid a gold pen across the table. If you just sign here. I picked it up, let it hover over the line, then paused. My voice was trembling, just enough to sell it. Actually, I said slowly, I'd like a few days. To get things in order. Margaret's belongings, the house documents, her letters. I can't rush it. Claire frowned immediately. Robert, we've already scheduled the movers. Ethan, wanting to appear magnanimous, placed a hand on her arm. It's fine, he said. Let him have the week. She hesitated, then forced a smile. All right. 1 week. I handed the pen back and met David's eyes for the briefest second. He gave a slow, imperceptible nod. As they left, Claire's heels echoed down the hall like a countdown. When the door closed, David looked at me. Did they take the bait? Hook, line, and sinker, I said. Good, he replied, sliding a small recorder across the table. Then you'll want to hear what Peterson captured last night. And when he pressed play, when I heard my son laughing about how easy it was to fool the old man and Claire discussing liquidating the asset within 18 months, something inside me shifted. The fury didn't rise again. It simply evaporated, replaced by something colder and cleaner. The game had changed. And I was already 3 moves ahead. That night, after hearing the recording, I didn't sleep. Not because of anger, that had burned away long ago, but because of focus. Every breath I took, every quiet second in that empty house, was another line in the plan forming in my head. They thought they were clever, but arrogance always leaves fingerprints. Ethan's laugh on that tape, smug, careless, was all I needed to remember who I was. They'd forgotten I built my career on finding hidden numbers, tracing trails no one else could see. I'd spent 40 years dissecting corporations that thought they could outsmart the system. My son was just another audit, a deeply personal one. By sunrise, I was back in the basement. The air smelled of paper and dust, the scent of truth waiting to be uncovered. I sat at my desk, the same desk where I'd balanced our family's finances since Margaret and I bought this house in 1989. The morning light slid across the oak surface, and I opened a fresh notepad. At the top of the page, I wrote a single word. Assets. Underneath it, I began to list them, line by line. House, $3,800,000. Savings, $612,000. Stocks, $1,430,000. Margaret's trust fund, $850,000. Old insurance bonds, $122,000. Miscellaneous antiques and collectibles, $200,000. Total, $7,014,000. And beside it, I wrote the word that Ethan and Claire had forgotten, integrity. I leaned back, tapping the pen against my thumb. They saw this house as a prize, a lifeboat for their sinking lifestyle. What they didn't know was that I'd already begun moving the money weeks ago, converting assets into liquid accounts under a holding trust. Not to hide them, but to protect them. The house, though, was different. The house was symbolic. It was the battlefield. So I picked up the phone again. David, I said when he answered, his voice groggy from sleep. You haven't gone to bed yet, have you? No, I said. And I won't until this is finished. I'm selling the house. There was a pause. You're sure about that? I'm sure, I said. Find me someone quiet. No listings, no signs on the lawn. Just one buyer, cash, quick, clean. Robert, this place is your life. It was, I said softly. Now it's leverage. By Monday, he'd found her, Sarah Whitmore, a discreet agent who specialized in off-market luxury sales. When she came to the property, she didn't talk about square footage or design trends. She just walked through each room, running her hand over the banister, the stone hearth, the archways. You built this yourself? She asked. With my wife, I said. She nodded, thoughtful. It feels that way. Homes built on love always do. She didn't ask questions. Didn't pry. She left with a quiet promise, give me 72 hours. She didn't need that long. By Wednesday evening, I had an offer, full asking price. $3.8 million. All cash. Buyer's name withheld under an investment trust, just as I'd requested. The papers were ready to sign. I stood in the living room that night, staring at the walls Margaret had painted, the window where she used to grow herbs in small ceramic pots. I thought about the life we'd built here, the laughter, the small arguments, the silence that followed. I thought about the boy who once helped me install the railing on the stairs, bending every nail but grinning with pride anyway. Then I thought about the man he'd become. And I signed. The next day, I called a moving company. Discretion, I told them. No logos, no uniforms. You'll be paid double for silence. By Friday morning, the house was a skeleton. Every memory carefully boxed, labeled, and sent to storage. The workshop tools went to the local trade school. Margaret's books, her poetry, her gardening journals, I donated to the library in her name. The only thing I kept was a single photograph, the two of us on the front porch, holding mugs of coffee, smiling at a future that felt infinite. I placed it in my jacket pocket. When the movers were gone, I walked through the empty rooms one last time. The air smelled of dust and lemon oil. I ran my hand along the walls, whispered a quiet goodbye, and closed the door behind me. That afternoon, David came over. He carried a thick manila envelope, the final sale documents, and set them on the table. It's done, he said. The transfer went through at noon. Funds are cleared. I nodded. Good. Now, we finish the rest. We spent the next hour arranging the final pieces. Copies of the educational loan agreement. The malpractice settlement file Peterson had uncovered. The recorded transcript of their dinner conversation. Every piece of evidence, printed and bound. At the end, I placed them all inside an envelope labeled, Ethan and Claire Graham. David raised an eyebrow. You're going to leave this for them? Yes, I said. They wanted to move in. They'll find the house empty, except for that. And the sale contract? I smiled. On top. He exhaled slowly. Robert, when they open that envelope, it'll destroy them. I looked at him for a long moment. No, David. It'll teach them. Destruction is loud. Lessons are quiet. He nodded, understanding at last. That evening, I sat in the study, my last night in that house. The moonlight cut through the empty window frames, painting silver shapes on the floor. Baxter lay at my feet, old but faithful, his breathing steady. I took out my notebook again and wrote 3 final words under the ledger I'd started. Assets liquidated. Balance restored. Then, for the first time in months, I allowed myself to sleep. Friday morning came crisp and bright. The leaves outside had turned completely, gold and rust-colored, blanketing the driveway. At 9:30, my phone buzzed, a message from Ethan. We're on our way. Movers arrive at noon. I looked at the screen for a long time, then typed back. Everything's ready for you, son. There's an envelope waiting on the mantel. Read it before you unload anything. I hit send, finished my coffee, and walked outside. The truck came at 10. I handed the foreman the keys and the last of my boxes, then climbed into the waiting car. As we drove away, I looked back through the rear window. The house stood there, quiet, dignified, and empty, exactly how I wanted them to find it. And when the car turned the corner, I smiled. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't leaving something behind. I was reclaiming something they could never own. My peace. The sky that morning was an unbroken gray, the kind that promises rain but delivers something colder instead. Ethan's SUV appeared at the end of the driveway just after 11. Behind it rumbled the moving truck, loud, impatient, and entirely unnecessary. From the passenger seat, Claire scrolled through her phone, confirming appointments and contractors. Ethan, hands tight on the wheel, looked like a man arriving to claim his inheritance. They were talking about repainting the kitchen before they even crossed the threshold. "Let's do a lighter tone," Claire said. "It'll make the place feel less dated." Ethan chuckled. Anything's an improvement over Dad's Museum of Memories. They didn't notice the sold sign until they were halfway up the driveway. Claire blinked first. What in the world? Ethan slammed the brakes. The SUV jerked to a stop, tires crunching gravel. For a long second, they just stared. It wasn't a joke sign. It wasn't a threat. It was real, solid mahogany with the embossed logo of Whitmore and Company, one of Boston's most discreet real estate firms. "Sold." Ethan whispered, his throat dry. That's impossible." "It's a mistake," Claire said automatically. "He's bluffing." "Who bluffs with a real estate company?" They climbed out of the car. Claire's heels dug into the wet ground as she marched up the stone walkway. Ethan followed close behind, face pale, voice rising. "Dad," he shouted. "Dad, what is this?" The only answer was the faint sound of wind rustling through the rose bushes. The front door, unlocked, creaked open with a hollow echo. They stepped inside. And froze. The house was empty. Completely stripped. No furniture, no rugs, no framed photos, no scent of coffee or wood polish. Just cold marble floors and the faint outline of where a life used to be. "Where is everything?" Ethan muttered. Claire's voice was tight. "Gone. He must have moved it." They walked room to room, the echo of their footsteps following them like ghosts. The guest room was bare. The master suite, once full of Margaret's books and Ethan's childhood keepsakes, was vacant, only sunlight and dust motes floating in the air. When they entered the living room, they finally saw it. On the mantel, where the family portrait used to hang, sat a single manila envelope. Thick. Heavy. Handwritten on the front in steady, deliberate script. Ethan and Claire Graham. Claire snatched it before Ethan could. Her lawyer's instincts told her to control the evidence. She ripped it open, pulled out the first set of papers, crisp, official, notarized. At the top of the page. Real estate sale and purchase agreement. Her eyes darted down the text, scanning line by line. Property address, correct. Buyer, a trust company. Price, $3,800,000. Closed and funded, yesterday, 4:15 p.m. Her face drained of color. "It's real," she whispered. "He sold it." Ethan stepped forward, disbelief turning to panic. No. He couldn't. Not without. He could, Claire interrupted, her voice trembling now. It was his house. Legally, his name alone was on the deed. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. "Where's the money, then?" He wouldn't just. Claire's voice cracked. "He would if he knew what we were doing." There was more in the envelope. Another document, thicker, older. It had a faint scent of dust and time. At the top, in bold letters, Intrafamily Educational Loan Agreement. Ethan frowned. "What's this?" Claire scanned the first paragraph and stopped breathing. "Oh my God. What?" "It's a loan," she whispered. "Your med school tuition. $350,000, not a gift." She flipped to the last page, eyes wide. He charged 4% interest. Compounded annually. For 20 years. She calculated silently, lips moving. When she reached the final number, her knees almost buckled. "Ethan, we owe him nearly $700,000. The color drained from his face. "That's impossible." He said. "He said whatever he needed to keep you happy," Claire snapped, panic breaking through her professional tone. And we never paid a dime back. She dropped into the nearest chair, the only piece of furniture left, and kept reading. Beneath the loan document was a transcript. Her own words stared back at her in neat, black print. Amelia, he's from a generation that sees compromise as a virtue. Daniel, he really thought we cared. Amelia, we'll wait a year, sell the house, and he'll be supervised. Her hand flew to her mouth. He recorded us, she whispered. He recorded us. Ethan took the pages from her, scanning the text. Each line was another nail in the coffin, every cruel joke, every greedy plan, every trace of mockery now documented in perfect clarity. At the bottom of the transcript, there was a note. Short. Typed. Final. This is not revenge. This is accountability. The audit is complete. Robert Graham. Ethan staggered back, gripping the mantel for balance. He planned this. Claire's voice rose, brittle and sharp. He humiliated us. He destroyed everything. No, Ethan whispered, staring at the papers. He just showed us who we are. They stood in silence for a long time. The house, or what used to be one, seemed to breathe around them, echoing with every word they'd ever said about the man who built it. Finally, Claire bent down and gathered the papers, her movements mechanical. But as she did, another smaller envelope slipped out, addressed in Robert's handwriting. She opened it. Inside was a single check, drawn from Sterling Law Trust, made out to Caroline Graham Memorial Scholarship Fund. Below it, in Robert's familiar script, were the words. The house was never for you. It was for her. And now it will help others learn the value of what you never did. Claire's breath hitched. She crumpled the paper and turned away, tears of fury, or shame, she couldn't tell which. Ethan just stood there, looking at the bare walls, the empty floors, the hollow space where his mother's laughter used to live. The man who'd once taught him how to build with his hands had just dismantled his entire life without raising his voice. He sank to the floor, buried his face in his hands, and for the first time in years, the sound that filled the house wasn't arrogance or argument, it was grief. Grief for what he'd lost. Grief for what he'd become. And somewhere far away, on a quiet highway heading west, Robert Graham smiled faintly at the morning sun, a sense of balance restored at last. By the time Ethan and Claire realized what had happened, I was already 3 states away. The highway stretched ahead like a ribbon of gray silk, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel the weight of anything behind me. No documents, no debts, no ghosts of expectation, just the steady hum of the tires and the slow exhale of freedom. David called around noon. They saw it? Oh, they saw it, I said. My voice came out calmer than I expected. Peterson texted me. He stayed long enough to watch them walk in. Said they both came out white as paper. David chuckled, a low, disbelieving sound. You really did it. You cleaned the slate. Not cleaned, I corrected softly. Balanced. There's a difference. I rolled the window down. The late October air rushed in, cool and dry. Somewhere past Worcester, the landscape shifted from suburb to open fields, and I could almost hear Margaret's voice teasing me about finally taking that road trip. Where are you headed now? David asked. I'm not sure, I said honestly. Maybe south. I hear the weather's better in San Diego. Retiring to the sun, huh? More like returning to the light, I replied. I stopped for lunch in a small diner off Route 84, the kind of place with checkered floors and a waitress who calls everyone Han. The special was meatloaf and mashed potatoes, and the coffee was burnt, but it tasted like clarity. As I ate, I thought about Ethan, not the man who'd stood in my living room with a folder, but the boy who once built birdhouses with me every summer. He used to line them up on the porch, proud of every crooked nail. I'd told him, if you want something to last, don't rush the foundation. He'd forgotten that lesson. Maybe I had two, somewhere along the way. By the time I finished my meal, the waitress had refilled my coffee 3 times. "You traveling alone?" she asked. "Not anymore," I said. "I've got my memories with me." She smiled, confused but kind. "Safe travels, then." 3 days later, I reached the coast. San Diego greeted me with that soft, eternal warmth I remembered from our honeymoon 50 years ago. The ocean was exactly as Margaret used to describe it, God's steady heartbeat. I rented a small apartment overlooking the water. Nothing extravagant. Just a balcony, a wooden table, and enough space for peace to fit comfortably. The movers arrived 2 days later with the boxes I'd sent ahead. I unpacked slowly, carefully, one photo, one book, one mug at a time. Margaret's framed picture went on the table near the window. Her eyes seemed to catch the afternoon light perfectly, like she was still trying to make sure I'd eaten lunch. I smiled and whispered, "We did it, Maggie. The numbers finally balance." That evening, I called David again. "Everything in place?" I asked. He cleared his throat. "Yes. The Caroline Graham Scholarship Fund is officially active. The full $3 million transferred this morning." "Good," I said. "She always wanted to do something like that." "She'd be proud, Robert," he said softly. "You turned retribution into legacy. That's rare." "It's not retribution," I replied. "It's correction. The kind of correction accountants dream about." He laughed quietly. "You're impossible." "Only consistent," I said. Then his tone shifted. "And Ethan?" I looked out at the ocean, watching the waves roll in, endless, patient, forgiving. "He'll find his way. He just needs to learn what loss feels like when it's earned." David sighed. "You don't hate him, do you?" I shook my head, though he couldn't see me. "Hate's inefficient. It doesn't solve anything. But I hope he remembers what I taught him, every account must reconcile, even the emotional ones." That night, I couldn't sleep. The sound of the waves against the shore reminded me of the ticking clock in my old living room, rhythmic, persistent, impossible to ignore. I got up, made tea, and opened my laptop. The scholarship page was already live. The Caroline Graham Fund for Ethical Medicine and Law. Its mission statement read, "For students who choose to heal and protect rather than exploit." I scrolled through the draft of the press release David had sent me. My name was listed as the founding donor, though I'd insisted on keeping it quiet. But one line caught my eye. "Endowed in loving memory of his late wife, whose compassion and intelligence continue to inspire." I smiled. "That's the only line that matters," I whispered. Then I clicked the link at the bottom, the one that allowed contributions from others. A small message appeared, "Would you like to send a dedication?" I typed, "For those who forgot what it means to care. May they learn before the balance runs out." The next morning, an email arrived from an unknown sender. The subject line, "I'm sorry." It was from Ethan. The message was short. No greetings, no excuses, just 10 words. "I don't know how to fix it. But I will try." I read it 3 times, then closed the laptop. I didn't reply. Some lessons only work when the silence answers for you. Outside, the sun climbed higher over the Pacific. A family was walking along the beach, parents holding hands, their young boy chasing a kite that dipped and soared in the wind. I watched them for a long time. That boy reminded me of Ethan before ambition turned his kindness into calculation. Before success became a scoreboard. Before he forgot that love doesn't appear on balance sheets. I took a sip of my tea, breathed in the salt air, and let the sound of the waves cover everything else. Later that evening, I wrote one final letter, not to Ethan, not to Claire, but to myself. Robert Graham, age 76. You have done your final audit. The numbers are true. The losses were heavy, but so were the gains. You didn't lose a son, you reminded him of the value of honesty. And perhaps one day, he'll thank you for it. Margaret would say you were too hard on him. Maybe she'd be right. But she'd also understand. Because love without boundaries isn't love. It's indulgence disguised as mercy. So rest easy now. You've earned your balance. I folded the letter, slipped it into the same box as Margaret's photo, and sealed it. The last line I wrote before turning off the lamp was simple, the closest thing to peace a man like me could ever have. Books closed. Audit complete. Outside, the tide whispered against the rocks. Somewhere, miles away, a son finally understood that a father's silence was never surrender, it was judgment delivered with compassion. And for the first time in decades, I slept without dreams. 2 months passed before I heard from Ethan again. By then, the Pacific had begun to cool for winter, though the days still ended in gold. I had fallen into a routine, morning walks by the shore, coffee at the same corner cafe, and long afternoons spent reading the old journals Margaret used to keep. My life had finally found rhythm again. When his email arrived, the subject line simply read, "I need to see you." The body was short, hesitant, even. I don't expect forgiveness. But I can't move on without speaking to you face to face. Please. Just one conversation. I'm in San Diego for a conference. Name the time and place. I stared at the message for a while, unsure what I felt. Pity? Curiosity? Maybe both. The old instinct, the part of me that wanted to analyze, weigh, calculate, wanted to ignore him. But another voice, quieter and older, whispered, "Finish the audit completely." So, I replied. Tomorrow, 5 p.m., Café Mariner, Ocean Boulevard. Don't be late. The next day, the sky was painted in soft orange streaks as I sat by the window, watching the sea roll against the sand. When Ethan walked in, I barely recognized him. The confident stride was gone. His suit jacket hung loose, his eyes had the kind of exhaustion you can't fake. He saw me, hesitated for a moment, then approached. "Dad." I nodded. "Ethan." He sat opposite me, hands clasped, searching for words. The waitress came by, but he waved her off. Silence filled the table, awkward and fragile. Finally, he spoke. "I don't even know where to start." "Try the beginning," I said. "It's the only place where truth still lives." He let out a small, broken laugh. "You always talked like that. Like life was an equation. And you always thought you could skip to the answer." He winced. "Fair." For a long while, neither of us spoke. The waves outside seemed to carry the conversation we couldn't have. Then, quietly, he said, "We lost everything. The penthouse. The cars. Claire's firm dropped her after that recording went public." "She leaked it herself," I said. He frowned. "What?" "Peterson sent me the report," I replied. "Once she realized you couldn't pay off the debt, she used the transcript to frame herself as the whistleblower. It kept her license clean." He looked down, shame washing over his face. "She filed for divorce last month." "I'm not surprised." He nodded slowly, eyes glistening. "I deserve it. All of it. I don't know how I became that man, Dad. The one who stood in your house and threatened you like a stranger." I sipped my coffee, then set the cup down gently. "You didn't become him overnight. You built him. Every lie, every shortcut, they add up, like interest. Sooner or later, the debt comes due." He swallowed hard. "And what about you? You got your justice. You sold the house, humiliated us, took away everything. Was that enough?" I met his gaze evenly. "It wasn't about punishment. It was about clarity. You wanted control over something you didn't build. Now you've learned what happens when you take without earning. He nodded, his jaw trembling. I know. I've been working at a small community clinic since the bankruptcy. Low pay, long hours, but, he paused, looking up. It's the first time I've felt useful in years. The people there, they don't care where I used to work. They just care if I show up. For a brief moment, I saw the boy again, the one who used to patch up stray dogs in the backyard with gauze and cotton balls. Margaret used to say he had healing hands. Maybe he still did. That's good, I said softly. You're starting over. But understand, this isn't about fixing me. It's about fixing yourself. He nodded again, slowly this time. I know. We sat in silence, watching the sun slide lower into the water. The light turned red, then gold, then a fading violet. Finally, Ethan spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. I saw what you did with the scholarship fund. I smiled faintly. Your mother's idea, long before she passed. I just finished what she started. He looked out toward the ocean, his eyes distant. You named it after her. But I saw the mission statement too: ethics, service, integrity. It's everything I forgot to be. I didn't answer. Sometimes silence is the only response truth deserves. He continued, voice breaking slightly. I applied to volunteer with the program. As a mentor for students. They accepted me. That made me look up. You? Yes. They said they needed someone who understands both success and failure. He gave a sad, crooked smile. Apparently, I'm qualified. For the first time in years, I laughed, a small, genuine sound. Your mother would like that. I hope so. The waitress came by again, refilled our cups, and disappeared. Outside, the sun finally dipped below the horizon. Ethan rubbed his hands together. I don't expect you to forgive me, Dad. I just wanted you to know. I see it now. Everything you did, the house, the loan, the recording. You weren't trying to hurt me. You were teaching me. No, I said, shaking my head. I stopped teaching you a long time ago. You just finally started learning. He exhaled shakily, tears running down his cheeks. Can we ever be a family again? I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time in a long time, I saw not the doctor, not the betrayer, but my son. Family isn't a place, Ethan, I said quietly. It's a practice. You show up, you keep showing up, and one day, it stops being work. He nodded, wiping his face. Then I'll keep showing up. When he stood to leave, he hesitated. Dad? Yes. Thank you, for not calling the police. I smiled faintly. I didn't need to. Life already issued the warrant. He let out a small, broken laugh and left, the bell above the cafe door jingling softly behind him. I stayed a while longer, letting the calm return. Outside, the ocean glowed under the first stars. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my old ledger, the same one I'd kept during the hardest years. On the last page, I wrote a single line beneath all the numbers. Forgiven, balance 0. Then I closed it for good. I walked out into the night, the air warm and clean, the kind that smells like endings and beginnings all at once. The city lights reflected in the waves like a second sky, and for the first time, I understood something Margaret once told me: peace doesn't come when you forget the past. It comes when you stop letting it collect interest. And as I stood there on the edge of the Pacific, I realized, the audit was truly complete. Not just for the house, not for the money, but for the soul of a family, finally reconciled. The morning after that meeting, I woke before dawn. The sea was still dark, a mirror of quiet silver stretching toward the horizon. I brewed my coffee, opened the balcony doors, and listened, to the tide, the gulls, the pulse of a world that kept moving no matter who was keeping score. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel the need to measure anything. The apartment was small, 2 rooms and a balcony, but it felt enormous because there was no weight in it. Margaret's photo sat on the table beside my cup, catching the early sun. Her laughter seemed alive in that picture. I spoke out loud, just once. "You were right, Maggie. He found his way, the hard way, but the true one." The waves answered like applause, gentle and rhythmic. Later that week, I visited the university to meet the first recipients of the Caroline Graham Scholarship Fund. They were kids from every corner of the country, nervous, bright-eyed, hungry to do something meaningful. One girl stood out to me. Her name was Nora, a first-year medical student. When I told her I'd helped start the fund, she smiled shyly. "I just wanted to say thank you. My dad's a janitor, and my mom cleans offices. This scholarship means I can study without them working double shifts." I shook her hand, my throat tight. "No need to thank me. Just promise me you'll remember why you started." She nodded. "To heal people, not to own them." Those words hit like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. That evening, I sat on the beach until the sky turned purple. I thought about Ethan, how he'd written again that morning. Just a short message. "First day mentoring. Feels strange, but good." I kept hearing Mom's voice while I talked to the students. It was enough. A man doesn't need long speeches to make peace. Sometimes, a single honest sentence can balance a lifetime ledger. I closed my eyes and could almost see her, Margaret, standing barefoot in the surf, looking back at me with that half-smile that said, "See? You did all right." For the first time, I believed her. A breeze rolled in from the water, tugging at my hair, smelling of salt and new beginnings. I watched a father teaching his little boy to cast a fishing line. The boy's first throw tangled instantly, the father laughed, knelt, and untangled it with infinite patience. It reminded me of all the things I once tried to fix too quickly, and how sometimes love isn't in the fixing, but in the waiting. The boy tried again. This time, the line flew straight, perfect. His laughter echoed across the sand. I smiled and whispered, "That's it, kid. One more try." The ocean carried the words away. When the sun finally dipped below the horizon, I stood, brushed the sand off my shoes, and turned back toward the boardwalk. The air shimmered faintly with the smell of grilled corn and sea salt. Life was going on, quietly, relentlessly, beautifully. Before heading home, I took one last look at the water and said the final words I'd written at the bottom of my notebook the night before. "A man's worth isn't in what he leaves behind, but in what he restores before he goes." Then I smiled, the small, genuine kind that comes when a story ends exactly where it should. The world didn't need to know what had happened in that big Boston house. It didn't need to know about contracts or debts or recordings. It only needed to know that one old man found peace, one son found humility, and one woman's name, Caroline, would keep building futures long after both of us were gone. The books were closed. The balance was clean. And for the first time in years, I wasn't an auditor, a husband, or even a father. I was just a man who had finished his work, and could finally rest.